Hi, my name is Christian and I will be giving you the D3 Labs for this semester. So, our idea in the D3 Labs is to create a final product. So each week I will be giving you some small lectures following by a demo on how to use the features that I'm teaching you, and ask you to do some exercises that will be your assignments for the week. Each assignment will be on top of the previous one, leading to the final product that will be something like the Gapminder, this visualization that you can see. So this is a very popular one that shows how country changes over the years in different variables. We are going to create a much simpler version of this one, so we don't expect to have all these features that the original one has, but I think it's a good use case to explore all the possibilities of D3 and how we can apply that to real visualizations. As I said, in each week I will be posting one video that will first explain some concept in very briefly how it works, and then follow it by a live demo on how to use these concepts and how to use them to build some visualizations. In each video I will pause sometimes. I will ask you to pause your video sometimes so you can perform some small exercises that together will be your assignment for that week. We have the forum as our main point of contact, so if you have any comment, questions or problem, please go to the forum. There will be one topic for each week, and post whatever doubt you have. Doesn't have to be very strongly connected with the lecture. So if you have any doubt about JavaScript or web development, you can post there and we are trying to answer you as best as we can. And almost everything that we are going to cover in the lab is covered by the book Interactive Data Visualization for Web, an introduction to designing with D3. It's from Scott Murray, and one thing good is that is available for free on the web. You can buy the hard copy if you want, but you can use the online version, and I will use this book as base for my labs, although I will not be following each chapter in sequence. Okay, before going into D3 itself, I would like to first this week give you an overview of how web development work and how this affects us and what you need to know in the language that we are going to use, so we can be everyone on the same page. So one thing is that web applications usually are client-server applications. If you have like big databases or you need high memory or high disk usage, you probably will need a server for that, because you cannot run any database on the client side, any big database, and you have limitations as well. So the server will always be some machine somewhere in the web that runs all this code and sends the results to the client. The code in the server can be many different languages, can be Python, PHP, Ruby, ASP.NET, Java, even JavaScript. If you use Node.js, you can run JavaScript in the server as well. They usually don't care about the UI itself, the user interface and how it will look like. The server part of the application is more concerned on access the databases, doing some filter and returning some results to the client. The client is actually the user interface, is what we see. The code of the client runs in the browser, so we can only use things that the browser can run. So, and one problem is that you cannot access file in the user computer, so you cannot access the files. You cannot run any big databases. So there are like some initiatives for small data management in client applications, but you cannot use very big one usually. But you can access data. If you have a CSV file or a JSON file, you are fine. You can access from the client. And but you have to deal with the memory, because you don't have a lot of memory. You are using the user memory, so you have to take care of that. And usually the building blocks for the client side is HTML to define the structure of your page. We have CSS to define how your page looks like, the style. And we have SVG to drawing. We have other options to drawing as well as Canvas, but for our lab, SVG will be enough. And to provide interaction and manipulate the page, we need one language, and JavaScript is the language that you can use. So you can only develop in the client using JavaScript at the moment. And so all these four technologies, HTML, CSS, SVG, and JavaScript, come together to generate visualizations and generate any dynamic page that you can see. The thing is a little complicated. So what D3 does, D3 connects the data that can be a JSON file or SVG and facilitates transforming this data in visual elements in the page. So D3, it doesn't add any new functionality to the browser. Anything you can do with D3, you can do without D3. But D3 make everything easier. So that's the reason why it's so popular and why we are going to use D3 in our labs. So first, HTML. We will need HTML to create the structure of the page. And one thing important about HTML, it tells what the element is. You don't have to think about how it looks like. You just have to think, where is this element in the structure? So a HTML is usually a tree, and you use tags to define what is this element and where it sits on the tree. You can have attributes that will provide some parameters. So for example, here in this example, we have an input tag that creates, you can use input to create checkbox or input text or radio buttons. And what's defined how it, if you will be a text box, checkbox or so on, is this type attribute. So we add this attribute and tell that in this case a text box. We are going to use the CSS to style the page. So as I said, HTML doesn't care about how the page looks like. It should care only how is the structure of the page. And then we use CSS to now say how we want the page to look like. To change color, background, borders, put some shadows, and change the opacity. All these things are done using CSS. So we have two main components. One is the selector that tells the system which element should receive that style, should be updated. And we have the properties that are actually the styles that we want to change. So for example, here we have the body, that is the selector. So this will select all the tags body. And we have the property background color with a value red. So this will change the background of the full body to red. Then we can use one thing with this dot in the beginning. This is a class. So this is not a tag. We can assign a class to a tag. We'll see that later. And we are asking to any element that has the class items to change the border to a solid line with one pixel thickness. And this is a gray color expressed in hexadecimal. So each one of this letter is specify the amount of lightness of each of the R, G, and B. So red, green, and blue. And we can tell how much we want of red, green, and blue in this color using hexadecimal notation. This one with this hashtag on the beginning is to look for the element with the ID title. So this one is class, this one is ID. So any element that has the ID title will have the font size changed to 20 pixels. So we have a bigger font. Okay, so let's see in practice, let's see how HTML and CSS come together to compose web pages and maybe web visualizations. Okay, so we are going to start from a blank file. So one thing that many people ask me is which editor to use. So one that I use is not the only one, but is the brackets. And one thing that I like about brackets is that it has this small lighting here that whenever you click, it will open a Chrome window, and everything that I change here will change in real time in the page. So you see that working here. So in the left side right now we have the page that we are building that have nothing, is an HTML file, just a white one, and in the right is actually the code, and right now we have nothing as well, so that's why everything is blank. So one thing that is important about HTML is that it has a basic structure. So usually you need a HTML tag, and inside the HTML tag you have two sections, the head section and the body section. So you see that as I put my cursor inside some tag, I have these blue lines here. That is basically where this tag is in the page. So this is a brackets feature. So that is why I like it. As I keep editing everything, it highlights where this thing is and updates the page. And so one thing is, head is always about what the user can't see. So there are some configurations, some files that you have to load, so even JavaScript you can put in the head. So things that are not rendered in the screen. So for example, I can put the tag title, and this is so you will see that this changes the title here, because anything in the head is rendered in the screen itself. But you can change things like this, you can change this icon and so on. So if I change to visualization, you will see that now is updated to visualization. And then we come to the body part. So the body part is actually what we can see. So for example, if I want a title, we have a tag called h1. So this is a title. So we can see that for default is a big text, but we can change that later. Remember, we are not talking how things will look like. We are just creating some structure to our document. So I have a title, then I can have a subtitle that is h2, subtitle. And then if I want to have some text, I can have a paragraph. This is a normal, right? And one thing that I can start to do is to group things. So for example, if I want to have an input where the user can type something, I can use input, and I want it to be a text box. So I can use text, and I can do that just to close the tag, so I don't have to have a start and a closing tag. I have only just one, so I don't have internal content. So now I have an input here that the user can type and write something, but I don't have a label. So I can, before the input, I can add a label. This is like a search box. Okay, so you see that if I change that to checkbox, it becomes a checkbox. If I change it to radio, then I have a radio button. And if I want a button, I can do that. And in this case, I can change the text on the button in this way. Cool. But I want to come back to my text. So one thing that you can do is group things and create a tree hierarchy. So for example, these two always come together, so I can put them inside a div. Div is a generic tag that you can, it's like a division of your page where you can put everything inside. So now the div group them together, and I could keep inserting things here, like a table, for example. For a table, you have to define the table itself. You can also, but you have also to define the row. So tr is a row in the table, and then I have td, that is a column. So you can have one column, second column, let's put column 1, column 2, and you can add a new line adding new TRs. So now I have many colors. Just a little bit, right? And we also have lists. So you see that everything is inside the div. So list, we have two types. We have UL, and you can keep adding li. So each li is one item of the list. So you have 3 items here, you have the 3 items here, and you have the dots. But we also can have OL list. So you see that if I change that, now you have numbers in each part of the list. So those are normal building blocks. You can keep building using them and specifying what each thing is on your page. But now I want to style them. I want to change how they look like. So I need CSS for that. So one way to do is to go to any place, like we have the title here, and do style as an attribute, and then do color red, for example. So you see that I changed the color to red. But if I have to do that for each one here, is a little complicated. So what we can do is go to the head section and create one tag called style, and then write everything here. So you see that here I didn't need a selector, because a selector is what tell which element to update. And since here I am inside one element, I just put the color that I want to have. But now if I want to move this to the top, I have to tell which element I want to change. So I want to change the H1, and I want the color. So let's change the H2, and I want the color to be blue. So now the color on the H2 and every H2 in the page will be blue. You see that if I do the same thing with the LIs, so you remember that we have LIs here on the bottom, that is all these items. So let's change the background color in this case, and let's change it to antique white. So you see that all LIs now has the same color. It applies to everything. But sometimes I don't want to apply to all LIs. I want to apply to some LIs. So what I can do, I can go to this li and create a class, and I will call it a special. So I want this one and the third one to be a special, and I want here the middle one to be a special. Now I can create the class special, and then define, for example, the font weight as bold. So you see that only the items with the class special will become bold. And you can even put, for example, the border and tell that is solid 1px, and I want the color to be red. So only those items have some specific properties. So, and also what you can do is, what if I want all the lists inside the UL to don't have, for example, this list item here, these dots. So one way is to go to all the lists and say that I don't want dots, but this will remove also from these ones, from the numbered ones. So what we can do is that we can tell only lists inside ULs should change. How do we do that? So we can do UL, LIs, and then only LIs inside some UL should change. And then I can do list style none. So you see that I removed only from this one. If I remove UL from here, you see that I also remove from this, but we want only the UL. Other thing is that CSS provides us some pseudo selectors. So I can do things like li over. So this means that whenever the mouse is over the li, I can do something, and like, for example, change the background color to black and the color of the text to white. and I want the cursor to be a hand, so it's a pointer. Let's see. So you see that as I hover, it changes the color. So those are the basics of the things that we need to CSS. One thing that is important is that you can also style the body itself. So one thing that often happens is that I can go here and tell H1 to have a background color equal yellow. Bad taste. Yeah. But we have this white border here. And this is not a problem of the H1. Actually, if you click in the body, you see that is the body that has this margin. So you can change also the body itself. And you can do margin 0. So now it fits perfectly. So you remove the margin. But then you have all these guys here that are like so close to the border. You don't want that. So you don't change their margin, because if I change the margin here, for example, then the background will move as well. So what you can change is the padding. So when you change the padding, the element, the space is like a margin inside the element. And you can do the same thing with this div here. So, but how can I select this div? You can define an ID. And I will call it contents. So I can now select this div using its ID, contents, and I can do padding 10. So everything inside the div will have a margin inside it. Okay, now as I said before, I want you to pause the video, and then I want you to create a page that looks like this image that you are seeing right here. So you only need HTML and CSS to create that. You have a title, you have a subtitle, and then you have a list of countries and an input box where the user in the future will be able to put some name and add to the list. Right now we just want to make the page. We don't have to make the add button to work. Some hints for you is use H1 for the title and put all the other elements, so from the country and name and the lists, everything inside one div. This will be useful in the future. And use a list for the country names. Although you cannot see the dots in the left, this is a list, and you have to remove the dots, but it's still a list. So as I said, we always think HTML as a way to structure the page, so we don't care if later we are going to remove dots, changing color or changing how it looks like.